As my journey through the analog horror landscape continues, I'll admit that the storytelling contrivances and repetition are beginning to wear thin on me, because it's become so egregiously apparent that the more recent efforts derive so aggressively from Chris Straub's Local 58 that I question if the subgenre is heading towards burnout. As such, while evidently not as tightly produced and still drawing heavily from what preceded it, the Mandela catalogue was partly a casualty of me becoming overexposed with analog horror over a short period of time. However, over the course of the series, it began to acclimate on me by presenting a USP focusing on the significantly more character-driven and abstract nature of fear. The Mandela catalogue is an ongoing psychological horror that takes place over two time periods, 1992 and 2009, where the fictional Mandela County is said to be one of several locations to have fallen prey to mysterious shape-shifting entities known as alternates. Like Gemini, these alternates have been declared by the government as doppelgangers that take on the form of humans to deceptively blend in with society, but distinct from Gemini, rather than violence, they use psychological warfare to manipulate and torment their next victims to the point of insanity and death. Their true form remains largely ambiguous. They're not aliens or cryptids, they're more, complicated than that, but we'll come to it once we set the groundwork for the rest of the story. Now, before we get into it, I'm not going to critique creator Alex Kister too harshly for my personal dislikes, because once again, I find myself questioning my own talents and work ethic when this elaborate creation comes from the mind of a teenager. To its credit, one thing that becomes abundantly noticeable over the course of 4 volumes is how much Kister's filmmaking ability improves, because we all have to start from somewhere, so it's unfair to review it in a strictly professional capacity. In fact, Kister even remade portions of the first volume to fit more closely with his emerging visual style. I still question how much of the series' later campiness is intentional or a product of technical limitation, but look, at the end of the day, this is still a chilling and sometimes provocative no-budget web series that's simply designed to entertain, so brace yourself. As always, please leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, leave a cheeky wee like and subscribe, and lastly, here are a few words from this video's sponsor, Raycon. With Raycon's neat fitting and fantastic sounding earbuds that sit comfortably in my pocket everywhere I go, there's no better way to detox from video making and re-energize myself than popping in these bad boys, pressing play, and letting all my tension slip away. What I love about Raycon is the ability to switch between noise isolation and awareness mode while selecting 3 distinct sound profiles to cater to what I'm listening to. So when taking in the warm summer's breeze while listening to Sam Fender, I switch to bass sound to increase the impact of his music, then when lying on the couch listening to Last Podcast on the left, I use pure sound to amplify the narration, and finally for watching analog horrors on the iPad, I use balanced sound to capture the surrounding immersion. Raycon comes with 8 hours of playtime, 32 hours of battery life, and seamless Bluetooth pairing, making them effortless to use, and the fact their wireless earbuds start at half the price of other premium audio brands means you get the luxury of quality sound without breaking the bank. With a 30-day free return policy, why not make the most of what's left of summer and treat yourself by clicking the link in the description box below or going to buyraycon.com/Ryan for 15% off your order. And heck, you'll also be helping out my channel as well. While the Mandela catalogue is generally more straightforward than other analog horrors that deal with grander cosmic ideas, there's still a fair bit of Papa Sylvia involved in piecing together the back-and-forth chronology of the story, so for the first time in a very long time, I'm actually going to do my best to make proper sense of it. Basically, the cold opening Overthrown establishes the series' religious overtone with a generic 90s Bible cartoon depicting the famous nativity story of Jesus' birth, until a strange face appears over the statue of God's angel messenger before being censored. With the hindsights of later videos, it implies that the angel is an alternate that's attempting to manipulate the original narrative in favor of the true threat of the series. The false angel steals baby Jesus' thunder by declaring itself to the shepherds to be the true savior of mankind, eventually addressing the viewer and mocking how easy it is to deceive the shepherds, who in biblical terms represent mankind's innocence, and control them through fear. With this in mind, the implication I got was that the original original story of the Bible didn't exactly play out in the way it was supposed to in this universe, as the alternate continually intercepted the angel sent as a messenger from God throughout the Bible, contorting all reality as we know it. In a later video exhibition, it directly confirms these suspicions, when the story of Noah's Ark shows the false angel condemn Noah, another embodiment of mankind's innocence, for resisting its control, and punishes him by planting a hidden, indistinguishable creature within Noah's Ark amongst the two of every animal. Given that the alternate's aim is to eradicate the person they wish to morph into, sometimes proclaiming that there's not enough room for the two of us, the hidden, indistinguishable creature amongst the two of every animal adds to the glaring subtext of the alternates being a metaphysical means of replacing good and innocence with evil and corruption. Stylistically, it even fits with the increasing use of black and white saturation as the series progresses, to add a murky, suffocating feel to a world being drowned in both figurative and literal darkness. However, the point that truly and vividly compounds the threat is when I watched this series with subtitles turned on, given the cryptic nature of the dialogue, and there's a hidden verse from 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14 that says Satan disguised himself as the angel of light. So yeah, looks like we're dealing with the big cheese downstairs in this one, folks. It was at this point that the series started reminding me of the neo-noir Fallen with Denzel Washington, where a detective tracks down a fallen angel known as Cecil, which possesses man into wickedness. It's certainly a unique twist on the analog formula, because compared to most religious horrors, I love the concept of this world being revisionist by default, where the story of God saving mankind and giving them an opportunity at salvation is constantly intercepted by the devil, which seems to be winning at this point. Of course, in the Bible, this is most prolific in the story of Adam and Eve being tempted by the devil disguised as a snake into eating the forbidden fruit, thus casting mankind's first sin. It naturally makes an appearance later in the series when the main characters, specifically our two separate protagonists, Lieutenant Thatcher Davis and the not-so-subtly named Adam, foolishly feed their temptations by investigating the alternates. In fact, I think it's implied that one of the means of suppressing the alternates is to ignore them and starve them of your fears, because Volume 4 suggests they lay dormant for some time after years of investigating ran dry. Essentially, in my perspective, all you need to know are that the alternates are like a mix between demons and tulpas. They materialize to cause pain and suffering, and their existence is based on people engaging with their presence. Volume 3 even confirms the tulpa theory when a creepy show in the same vein as Chris Straub's Candle Cove called The Night of the Subconscious shows a strange face directly telling the viewers to manifest their imaginary friend into reality. We can determine this using Volume 1's opening, where a public service announcement by the ironically titled US Department of Temporal Phenomena, the term temporal relating to real-world circumstances as opposed to spiritual, warning about the nature of hostile alternates, which we know take on identical characteristics to living people, but sometimes they take on unnatural peculiarities and deformities when unable to fully transform. I'm going to avoid regurgitating my points about Invasion of the Body Snatchers because I already spent that on Gemini, but the big point about Volume 1 is establishing the Mandela effect, a bizarre phenomenon where multiple people can share the same false memories of something when they're actually wrong. As a result, it contextually makes sense that Mandela Catalog relies on analog horror's trademark contrived delivery, because the main thesis of its fear is how uncertain it makes your understanding of reality become. In fact, people's perception has become so badly warped in this universe that they've coined the condition metaphysical awareness disorder, or MAD syndrome, as a response. Now, this is where I think the series takes on a profound and personal perspective that will hit people differently based on their own experiences. For me, much of the series feels like a meditation on depression and loneliness, especially when you consider it a metaphor on people being harassed and tormented by something pretending to be a close friend or loved one in an effort to drive them down a deeper, darker emotional well. The fictional MAD syndrome is a result of being exposed to verbal information that the patient doesn't wish to know, and it's resulted in higher self-inflicted death rates due to intense delusions caused by the alternates, which are a bully putting negative voices in your head. When I said the threat was complicated, this is why. It's an abstract representation of declining mental health, intrusive thoughts, fears, anxieties, delusions, and paranoia. Speaking purely for myself, at its worst, it becomes incredibly difficult to rebalance your perception on life because you've weathered away so much into oblivion that there's less and less light at the end of the tunnel. And I can't begin to imagine what it says for those living with diagnosed conditions. In fact, while writing this, I came across a 2021 interview with GQ where Kister acknowledged how the pandemic and quarantine heavily shaped the story, as he wanted to focus on losing that sense of security. It vividly puts the oppressiveness into perspective in a way that makes the series feel all the more real despite its abstract qualities. As such, the characters, which we're going to get into now, all generally have one thing in common. They're all dealing with worsening isolation in a time of perpetual uncertainty. And because the only thing that is certain is the existence of this threat, the only clear direction they can go is towards the very thing that wishes to feed on what's left of their being, a thing that continues to exist unless you starve it of attention. Again, the bully in your head. From here, I'm going to go into the actual events themselves to walk you through how it develops its horror and characters, so hopefully you're still with me at this point. The metaphor is first accentuated when the police discover the journal of Mark Heathcliff, which details his crisis of faith and despair when nobody came to save him either spiritually or literally when tormented by an alternate. The catalyst to the story surrounds Mark's death in 1992, after he receives a call from his friend Caesar, asking him to turn on the security cameras in Caesar's house while he goes to hospital to check on his mother, who has fallen into a mysterious coma. The intent is to see if they can capture footage of what scared her before her collapse, but in a compelling bit of world building, both characters are fully aware of the presence of alternates, which have seemingly become part of humanity's existence despite efforts made by the government to stem their presence. We soon learn that an alternate in the form of Caesar follows Mark home after he is baited into awakening their presence in Caesar's house, eventually leaving Mark trapped alone in his bedroom for several days before ending himself to stop the alternate's torment as it waited outside his room. What reinforces the series' overwhelming sense of isolation and helplessness is when it's revealed that police are trained to ignore assisting anyone reporting alternate sightings, as doing so is not worth the risk, suggesting to me their influence is spread when given attention, thus it's better to just leave it be. Additionally, perhaps the scariest part of the series are the recurring appearances of an enigmatic intruder on television screens, along with unconfirmed sightings of a smiling boogeyman staring at people from the corner of their room, 4-year-old Mark even being one of them. In the intruder alert video, we learn of a mother who discovered her child was missing, and upon noticing the intruder on the television, herself in fear, but disturbingly, investigator Lieutenant Thatcher Davis determines this to be a separate case from the alternates. It definitely gives off Stranger Danger's Slenderman vibes, with an emergency alert declaring over 3,000 children have gone missing across 4 counties after sightings of the mysterious man on the television. My immediate suspicion was that this was the devil checking in on its alternates, seeing as the next video introduces the Noah's Ark cartoon and the implanting of a hidden creature amongst the flock, thus furthering my point about Satan consuming innocence and replacing it with further corruption. In a compelling twist, Volume 2 actually skips forward to 2009, where 2 wanted individuals, Adam and Jonah, run a paranormal society, and are hired by an anonymous caller to investigate the spirit of their dead cat at their house in Mandela County while the caller is out of town. Assuming it's actually the same house previously occupied by one of the victims from earlier, this story focuses on Adam becoming obsessed with the bad vibes of the house and eventually encountering the man on the television. This negative presence, let's say, is previously called upon when a police officer bailed on investigating the hanged mother, which is given clarity in Volume 3 when a divorced couple, Lynn and Jude Murray, discuss their crying baby before the father reluctantly goes to check on them, only to find Lynn's body and a sighting of the enigmatic smiling intruder. The callbacks are quite cleverly constructed because they don't feel forced or out of of place. They sustain the mystery while adding gradual context to our understanding of what's going on, with Volume 3 even ending with a pretty dramatic payoff that makes the series seem like it's logically drawing closer and closer to a conclusion. In it, we see Lieutenant Davis and his partner Sergeant Weaver investigating the house, only to be attacked by something beyond simply an alternate, and while the stilted CGI and animation of the deformed alternate is a little awkward in places, you could say it fits the time period of a 90s PS1 video game aesthetic, adding a bit of charm that's then overreached in Volume 4. The attack is explained during an interlude that introduces a more aggressive form of alternate known as Overdriven Assimilation, where the entity has taken on the appearance of so many victims that it's practically a Frankenstein abomination without a true consistent form. Unfortunately, they kinda undersell it by making it look more like the Scream painting than something that should be genuinely menacing. However, nonetheless, what stuck out to me about the series wasn't so much the horror, but the surprising emotional weight of its characters. Volume 4, despite its jarring green screening and visual effects that look like the opening of Resident Evil 1, meditates a lot more on the grief and despair that defines the series. We see Lieutenant Davis mourning the death of his partner Weaver while mixing between guilt, anger, and doubt, before seeing terrifying visions of her in the corner of his room in the form of a smiling alternate, again playing into the metaphor that these entities represent the dark and dangerous side of our psyche. He monologues a surprisingly poignant goodbye that conveys an overwhelming pain that's both indescribable and yet universal to anyone who's experienced loss, especially in helpless and uncertain times. It reminded me of the supernatural J-horror Kiro, which I covered a few years back, about people living in the anomaly of the new millennium, a state of uncertainty and apathetic disorganization where each character is slowly consumed by a metaphysical threat that refuses to explain itself or give purpose or meaning to its actions. By the end of Kiro, the population dwindles much like the Mandela Catalogue, as spirits literally absorb their victims into nothing, leaving little more than a mere shadow of their existence. They'll be remembered by those closest to them, but those memories will soon fade when those mourning meet their own conclusions, and one day whatever presence we had will simply cease to be. Anyway, during this, the story escalates to reveal Adam survived his encounter in the house, yet Jonah seemingly perished. It confirms Adam was actually the missing child of the Murray family, and upon confronting the elusive intruder himself, in my theory it reveals Adam to be an alternate who doesn't realize he is one, and is perhaps destined to become the Mandela Prophet, who can triumph and defeat the evil Hell House LLC 3 style, or maybe he's actually something more evil, the Damien to Satan, so to speak. It's possibly confirmed in an epilogue that shows who I think to be Adam deforming and changing in the corner of a room, perhaps suffering overdriven assimilation. That said, while I didn't address all the tiny nuances in between, the problem I had with Volume 4 as a whole was the introduction of new characters who don't seamlessly integrate that well into the story, such as some dude called Dave, who grows obsessed with the intruder and is later killed in quite a silly fashion by the false angel I assume to be Satan outside St. Gabriel Church, Gabriel being the archangel messenger typically sent by God. Granted, it's a bit of an unfair criticism when the series is still ongoing, so until it concludes, my feelings towards Volume 4 are still technically in limbo. It's always difficult to conclude something like this, but as it stands, the Mandela Catalogue has its moments, and the journey I've tried to piece together feels sincerely personal, introspective, and thoughtful in how it handles depression, grief, trauma, and loneliness. As the world Alex Kister presents grows darker, colder, and more helpless with each video, it leaves me hoping that one day we see a bright light at the end of this, whenever that time may be. I'm not going to pretend I understand everything. I imagine a lot of people will correct me on certain aspects of it in the comments below, but hey, this is just my interpretation. So until next time, stay safe, stay away from doppelgangers, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.